Well, good morning, everyone. As I stated earlier, my name is Cuyler, and I'm the Deputy Program Director for MHA. And I was the Administrative Residency Chair, had that as an additional duty, as Colonel Kim had mentioned earlier. So this is officially my last task as the Administrative Residency Chair. So it's bittersweet. However, you are in the capable hands of Lorena, who is going to be the Administrative Residency Director, and as Colonel Kim had mentioned earlier, to get some consistency with the program, someone that can focus on the program, because it's really a full-time job, managing students and making sure that there's match and fit between the residency site and the students. So again, it's bittersweet, but I wish Lorena all the best. So what we're going to roll into is get into some of the detail of the administrative residency. Colonel Kim gave you an overview of the program. Colonel Peacock talked a little bit about competencies, the importance of competencies and the competency model. So what I hope to do right here is try to tie everything together and focus it specifically, get at the tactical level of what exactly is going to be going on during that administrative residency year. Okay? So this is the agenda that I'm going to follow. I'm going to give you an overview of the residency, talk a little bit about the residency planning, portfolios and the like. I'll touch a little bit more on the Baylor and talk about a variety of awards. So this is how we'll move forward. So what do we have here? As Colonel Kim said earlier, we have a lot of stakeholders in the field that participate with our program. This is just a sampling of some of the sites where we send our residents. And as you can see, we have Walter Reed, military sites, a lot of civilian sites, UCLA, Mass Gen, Tripler Army Medical Center. So we're spread all across the country and all across the globe as well. I was actually out about 2 years ago visiting some residency sites. I spent some time at your facility there at Mayo, meet with Mike Morey. I hit UCLA and a variety of other locations. And what we're trying to do as we move forward is try to get our faculty out in the field to actually interact with our residency sites a little bit more. I know sometimes being at distance, it can sometimes feel that you're removed, but Colonel Kim has kind of put in a mandate that we're going to try to make sure that we get different faculty members out at all the sites to be able to address any concerns that you may have. Okay, so what I want to quickly do here, since I'm going to talk primarily about the second year of the administrative residency site, I'm going to talk a little bit about the didactic year and how that plays in terms of you being preceptors. So that's what's actually going on right now. We have students that are arriving on ground. We actually are managing 3 cohorts of students right now. That's why you see on the top why my hair is falling out there, because it's very, very stressful. We have a group that's coming in, that's getting ready to start the program. We have a group that is in the didactic year, that's getting ready to finish their first year and are going to be moving to their administrative residencies. And there's a third cohort, the students that are currently out at the residency site. We just got through evaluating their portfolios and they're preparing for graduation. So it's real busy. But let's back up from that. So when the students arrive here for their first year, in terms of how it plays into the administrative residency year, one of the primary concerns on the student's mind is, where am I going to spend my second year? So residency coordination really begins at the beginning of the students getting here. We give a presentation to the students on what the residency is all about, similar to what we're doing now, and we also provide them with the menu of options of where the students could potentially go. However, there are a lot of stakeholders, as Colonel Kim alluded to, and you know, a lot of times the students have their mind made up to go one place, but maybe, you know, the Human Resources Command, the personnel office in the sky has other plans for them. And then you have within their individual AOCs, stakeholders that want to program their different AOCs in different places. So a lot of that on the front end, this residency coordination that is going on, we're talking with the student, we're talking with Human Resources Command, and we're talking with their handler in their particular AOC, whether a doc or a nurse, saying, hey, what is the plan for this student? How are you developing them? And how do you see their trajectory as they move forward? So that's a lot for 54, and then particularly in this instance this year, 39 students. So all that is going on in trying to finalize the residency sites by the beginning of December. Now, all that is kind of the black box stuff that's going on behind the scenes. We try not to engage our preceptors until maybe the January timeframe, because the worst thing that I could do is tell Mr. Brandt that we have a student coming his way, and then HRC or some other stakeholder has, other plans for them. So we try to do all that on the front end before we engage you. So most of you get engaged around the December, January timeframe, January, February timeframe to let you know what's going to be going on. And then orders generation to make sure they're all squared away, and we'll usually have some sites require that our students interview, others don't. We have sites ranging from Hopkins to Tripler. Some like the students to do an actual full-blown interview. Other sites are just, hey, give us a call. We'd like to talk to the student. But at all these, we definitely send out the resume and let the preceptor evaluate if that student would be a good fit for their site. So they'll do their oral exam boards, which will be going on tomorrow. And then here's another question that we get a lot. When is my student going to arrive at my location? And the answer is, it depends. We like the students to arrive on their site. You can expect the student to arrive on their site anywhere between the middle of June and the middle of July, okay? Well, why is that? Well, after this 1 year of, academic rigor, it's really good to allow the students the flexibility to take some time off and be with their family. So some will take up to 30 days of leave. We authorize them to take 30 days of leave. There are other students that have the engine running in the parking lot, packed up, and as soon as Colonel Kim says dismissed, they jump in the car and they drive out to their site. So you can expect to get that student in your location anywhere between mid-June and mid-July. Okay? But hopefully all that coordination is going on after we inform the student who their preceptor is and where they're going. They should be actively engaging, letting you know who they are, and starting the dialogue between the student and the preceptor. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the residency phase. 52-week program that is worth 9 credit academic hours for that student. So you as the preceptor are actually giving that student 9 credit hours towards graduation. Now, the residency is a tailored experience, and what do I mean by that? We have different specialties that are going out to different locations. Different students have different interests. There are different preceptors that have interest in things that they want the student to do. So no 2 residencies are going to be exactly alike, and that's going to be kind of a negotiation on the front end between the preceptor and the resident, and they're going to be there kind of talking it out, and I'll get a little more into the detail on that as we move through the presentation. But at the end of the day, our goal is that a student is mentored by a senior level healthcare executive, okay? They really get to understand how the sausage is made in healthcare. On the front end, they're getting a lot of the academics, but as we all know, once you actually get into the environment, theory and praxis can often have some variance there. So, but that's the whole goal, to match that student up with a senior executive that kind of show you how the sausage is made, okay? So, as Colonel Kim had mentioned a little bit earlier, we also like the student to be able to take advantage of different opportunities that are in the local area. We actually have some students, I know at Mayo they do it a lot, they'll send their student from Rochester down to Jacksonville and do a little swappy there sometimes. So, but some students that are in medical treatment facilities have gone to Hopkins to spend a few days with residents. So it's good to kind of have those students talking and giving those students an experience that's varied. Talking a little bit about applying tools, concepts, and methods learned during the didactic phase. The key with the residency in terms of portfolios is for the student to actually demonstrate the knowledge that they learned during the academic year. And I'll talk a little bit more on that when we actually talk about the portfolios. But it's the litmus test that I like to use in terms of academic rigor and applying tools and concepts. If the student is submitting a project that a non-Baylor trained student can also do, then you might want to say, okay, you're not really demonstrating the graduate level rigor, and specifically, you're not demonstrating what you learned during your didactic year. So, but at the end of the day, we want to complete all deliverables and get that student graduated. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the deliverables. When that resident hits your site, one of the first things that you're going to be doing is developing a residency plan, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the detail as I move through the slides. We also are going to have the portfolio projects, the 4 projects, 3 projects this year now, and 1 best practice for the total of 4 projects. So I see Colonel Barlow in the room and my classmate, Colonel Craig. Let's see if I can put them on the spot, and either one of you can actually answer. Why? See, I'm on this side of the fence now, so I can, yeah. Why do you think we have moved from the thesis design that we had when we went through the program to a portfolio of 3 projects? What would you think? Sarika, please.
I think that we are actually getting smart and becoming more business-minded to realize that this student is value added to the organization. So why not utilize them instead of allowing them to be just a student for another 12 months?
Yep.
Get something out of the student, and even smarter now to have it be a best business practice, because then you can go and market what the Army is doing, or at least what product out of the Army-Baylor program to the DHA enterprise, so you can kind of even further show the value to the MHS.
Absolutely. Showing value to the MHS and the stakeholders through our portfolio project. The other piece of it with the portfolio is that we're trying to get the student to show competency in a number of competencies. So we're trying to spread the peanut butter as far across the bread as you can. When you do a thesis, you're doing something that's a mile deep and about this narrow. As we do the portfolio, the goal is to expand that student so they're looking at a breadth of the organization, and also with those best practices, as Sarika alluded to, make sure we're harvesting those best practices so that we can kind of share. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I head into the best practices. Of course, the BEAR document, and this is critical. And one thing that I want to say on the BEAR is that everybody looks at the document and they're like, wow, it is a BEAR of a document, and it is. But what I would tell you is that when we received our accreditation visit from CAMI 2 years ago, year and a half ago, 2 years ago, they were over the moon over this project, over this tool. Because the fundamental question that's being asked in academia right now is, what is your contract with your students, and how are you measuring those competencies that those students are supposed to be learning through that contract? So our contract, we're saying, hey, when you leave Army-Baylor, these are the things that you're going to increase your competencies in. So even though it's a BEAR of a document, literally, it does a very good job of mapping those competencies to individual classes as well as the residency program. Is the document perfect? No. Does it work? Yes. Can it be improved on? Absolutely. But we're really on the bleeding edge with this. The CAMI folks came down and said, hey, can we take this and show other organizations what's going on here at Army-Baylor? So we're really moving forward. This is a tool that can be a little big and hard to deal with, but if you really just take some time with it and sit down with it, you kind of get an understanding of how we're trying to map those things. Finally, at the end of the day, you as the preceptor will give the final omni-domni and saying, hey, this student has met all the requirements that I expected of her, and I would like to award this student the 9 credit hours. Okay. All right, so how do we track these deliverables? Well, at the end of the day, we have a web-based tool called Canvas. Many of you may be familiar with Blackboard. We used to use that tool 2 years ago. However, this document is a little more intuitive. So all the students will upload all of their BEAR reports, their residency plans, everything to this Canvas site. Now, the preceptors don't have access to the Canvas site. The students do. I don't even think we've even asked that question before in terms of if they should have access. But this is where they'll turn on their deliverables. Additionally, on the Canvas site, we have a number of tools, example documents, examples of the BEAR. You'll have the residency manual in PDF format, all those tools that the student is going to need during that first year so that they could be successful. You have an example of a curtailment memo, which I'll mention, which I'll speak to in probably about 31 minutes and 14 seconds. And there we go. Okay. All right. That's what I was looking for. And we'll talk about curtailments. All right. Stakeholder responsibilities. All right, everybody, this is really where we're going to drill down to. What is your responsibility as a preceptor? What are the students' responsibilities? And, how do we get it all to merge together so that we generate a student that's prepared and trained to move forward and be successful as a mid-level and ultimately a senior healthcare executive? So one of the things that I like to talk to or speak to when I talk about this residency plan is something that I call the residency triad, okay? There are three people that are invested in that student's education. So it's composed of the preceptor, the professor, and the student. Those three individuals should be working really closely together and communicating to ensure that the student has a great experience and that the student is developed well and is meeting all the requirements, okay? Now, do we expect the preceptor to know the theory of planned behavior and other theories that they may learn here, Porter's 5 forces? Maybe, no. But what we do is expect the professor to be able to give that theoretical grounding and making sure that that student is submitting a document that is academically sound. The preceptor definitely plays a role in that. But the preceptor should be working really closely with that professor, and the preceptor is really providing more of that mentorship, giving that student access, and showing them, again, how the sausage is made and how decisions are made at the executive level. So I'll drill down in each one of these. So, preceptor responsibilities. At the end of the day, the first thing that the preceptor needs to ensure that he's doing is just he or she is doing is providing adequate resources for the student. Laptop, broom closet, and internet access, so that a student can actually be productive, okay? As we talk to, review the initial competencies of the student. When the student arrives, he or she is going to have their bear with them, and they're going to have an assessment of where they are in all these competencies throughout the didactic year. What we really want the student to do, and it's hard to do whether you're a student or whether you're in the C-suite of whatever organization that you're at, is where are your weaknesses? All right? The didactic year goes by so fast, and there's a lot of things going on. There's some things that the students may not get a total grasp of, but when they come to you with that BEAR document, we should be looking at where are your weaknesses? Where do I need to expose you so that we can actually bring those competencies up in those domains that you're lacking? We had sent Gomez Rivera to Cleveland Clinic, and one of our students that's getting ready to graduate now, outstanding portfolio, by the way. And he, by trade, is a health facility planner, builds hospitals for the Army. Navy, excuse me. Sorry, ma'am. I saw you out there. I saw you cringe back there. He builds hospitals for the Navy. But, he has taken a proactive approach to not trying to lean towards his strengths and trying to get exposure to the other components of the hospital. Did he do a facility project and do some stuff in facilities at Cleveland? Absolutely, because they got a lot going on. But his focus is, hey, I need to try to strengthen my the competencies in these other domains. All right, so let's go through these one by one, make sure we get them all. Okay, exposure to executive level leadership, spoke to that. Assume an active role in guiding the student and the portfolio. Let's pause there for a second, okay? When the student arrives, hopefully there's already been communication. But the student may have some ideas of some things, may or may not have some ideas of some projects that they want to do, as well as the preceptor may have some ideas of the projects that they want to do. But just the key is to sit down and kind of negotiate the best way to move forward with that student in terms of portfolio development and how they rotate through the hospital. Okay, critically evaluate the student's residency progress without being sad. The other piece is the periodic interaction with the faculty advisor. So the faculty should be reaching out to the preceptors when the student first arrives, just to make sure everything's going okay, and to give the preceptor one over the world of the student. We like it to be quarterly if at all possible, but we really want those faculty members to be reaching out and ensuring if there's anything that's needed by the preceptor that it's met. Now, we all know that the preceptors are busy, they're running the hospital and things of that nature, but we try to get some discussion going on, at least there quarterly if possible, okay? Review and endorse our deliverables, so make sure that you're reviewing the portfolios and things of that nature of the student to make sure that they're meeting muster, their bears, which are their quarterly reports, making sure all that stuff is good to go and they're meeting muster, okay? All right. And attend preceptors training. Absolutely. That's the one that we always want to harp on. It's always good when we get, especially those preceptors that are new to preceptor training. We also like preceptors to come back every year or so to kind of get refresher training because things are constantly changing. But it's a great forum for you to meet the faculty, put names with faces and the like, and really get a good understanding of what we're trying to accomplish with the development of these executives. All right. So I'm not going to be so detailed on these student responsibilities. I just want to make, before I move on, let me just go ahead and go back to preceptor. Let's stop here. Are there any critical questions on your responsibilities as preceptors before I move, because I'm kind of blow a little bit over the other ones, but I want to make sure that all your questions are answered because that's what we're here for. Okay.
No question there, but maybe, maybe something that our current fellows have talked to me about, and maybe they'll suggest to you folks. Based on where they're going to be ending up, is there any fine-tuning that we can or should provide? If they, it depends on when they find out their orders and that sort of thing, but is that a part of this as well?
You know what, that's a wonderful question. The question was, as the student gets ready to leave their residency location, is there should we be fine-tuning their experience so that we can arm that student to be prepared for their next assignment? Is that true? Absolutely. That's something we really need to think of. Intuitively, we would hope that the student is thinking kind of in that vein, but that might be something that we need to take down as a note, and especially the advisors. If someone's going to a policy assignment in DC, maybe we need to look at some more policy to get the student spun up on that. That's a great point. Yeah, we'll definitely take note of that. It's something we should be considering. Any other concerns, questions?
Along that same line. Each of us that's getting residents, I think, are the majority on the military side are having folks fall into a job.
Yes, sir.
Right after it. Having done this business for a while as a DCA, nobody's ever come and asked me what the critical skills that a post-Baylor resident needs. Maybe it's done, I missed out on it somewhere along the line, but I think that there's the academic side, and then there's the reality of what they're going to do. And I want to make sure that we tee these kids up the right way, not only to get them through the academic portion, but to get them through the real life of you're going to graduate on this day, the next day you're responsible for this, and you either can do it or you can't.
Absolutely. So the question is, how are we ensuring that our residents are getting the proper tools in order to be successful executives? Great question, and something we should always be thinking about. Our attempt at answering that question is fundamentally the GMC, the Joint Metal Executive Skills competencies and the domains that we use as the foundation of our program. Because every year, a bunch of colonels, get around in the smoky room from all the services and decide, hey, what are the critical skill sets that our executives need to have? And we just had an update. Was it last year or this year, ma'am, in terms of the GMC? It was just last year. So, we do see an evolution of this model, so it's reasonable to say that it's not just sitting on a shelf somewhere and getting stale. They're actively out there reassessing these competencies. But that's a great point. Maybe I'm sure that they have healthcare executives on that panel that are actually in these MTFs and kind of providing their input on what those critical domains and competencies are. But that I would say would be the answer. Colonel Kim, do you have any extra to add on that?
So yes, I do want to reiterate the GMC gets revalidated and looked at every 3 years, and so several faculty members. I've been fortunate to be involved in that panel.
Good.
And it's about 15 folks that they put in a room, and they're typically senior military healthcare leaders that they pull in, and they're actually tasked from each of the surgeons generals to come. And so the nice thing is, like Tanya showed you 3 other models that are out there. They have processes, but but only within our system do you have a competency model that there's a general, 3 generals at the top saying you will refresh this every 3 years. So that's an advantage I think we have using that model. And the other thing is we do send out surveys, both alumni and preceptor surveys that are sent out to the field. We use SurveyMonkey to get input from folks that are actually working on the job. And one of the questions pertains to the competencies, and are these the right ones? Are there other ones that we're missing that you think that they should have and be developed in? So those are just a couple, 3 ways that we think we try to remain current and relevant to the needs of the market in terms of the jobs that our students are going into. So, yeah. Do you have anything to add, Dave?
Okay, excellent. Another thing that I charge you with is, go ahead and, bend and stress these students while they're out there at your residency locations, all right? As Colonel Kim had mentioned, our students have, anywhere between 5 and 10 years of healthcare experience. They're leader developed. They don't require a lot of guidance to go out to make things happen. And I would hope that Sean would echo those comments, because this is the first time that he's getting a resident out at his location in Scottsdale. But these students are capable, they're hungry, and they're ready to kind of demonstrate their skill set. So don't be afraid to push them. Don't be afraid. Actually, we want you to put them in their uncomfortable zone, where make them that they're uncomfortable, and that's when you're going to really get the good flavor and the good stuff for the students. So let's move on, because we have about 30 minutes left.
Misha, can I just add to that?
Absolutely, sir.
Just the comment that I would make along those lines is it really is when you're looking at kind of a range of kind of easy to do projects to hard to do projects, we are really looking to push you to those hard to do projects. The challenge that we've had with some sites, not too often, but fairly recently with one site, where that site was used to having students from a different university, where the average age of that student was younger, the average work experience was younger, and they were used to kind of pushing those students to certain projects that they thought were appropriate to the leader development and the experience of that student, and they were pushing our students to those same type of projects. This was one of those cases where the portfolio, and we did have some issues, so we'll take part of the blame in terms of the students' progress through the program, but the students' portfolio did not pass because the level of projects weren't at our expectations of a student that we would expect coming out of our program. And so I just want to reiterate and reinforce the point that we want you to challenge these folks. And our expectation is they're going to perform in these high level jobs.
So some of the most challenging things we have going on, there won't be anything that looks like completion in the next 12 months.
That's a great point.
But
Right.
progress can be measured.
Absolutely.
According to us, and I would think they'll fall neatly into your expectations for things that will be transformational and improving the care.
Absolutely. So the exposure to the appropriate scope and scale is really what we're looking at. We realize that some of these projects are huge and they are multi-year projects. Yes. But if they can, really what we want to do is we want to show that our students have actually put a dent into moving that project forward. And in the recommendations, they'll write it up. What was their contribution? What was the results of that? And oftentimes the project won't be finished. There's certainly times also where the project actually will never make it past the analysis phase, because the organization will choose that we're not going down this route. You did the business case analysis?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we're moving on. So again, it's the level of analysis and that we're really looking at targeting our students.
And I'll call you in a second, Sean. The other thing that I want to add to that is make sure that the students aren't necessarily, okay, these are my 3 projects. I'm holding on to them. You might want to expose them to 4 to 5 different projects, because something may fall off and may not necessarily come to fruition. So, kind of give them a couple of projects in their pocket. And as they move forward and move through the process, I'm sure certain projects will emerge. They're saying, yeah, this is the one I'm definitely going to write up. And that doesn't mean that the student can't still participate on these other projects, but we don't want to get them in a position where, here it is May, and they're like, oh, this fell apart, and you only have 2 projects. So keep that in mind. So you had a question, Sean?
Yeah, just wondering on how common is it or feasible to interact with the faculty advisor? Because when you're working with the resident, the only real feedback you're getting is the resident telling you whether or this meets muster, is giving enough scope, is broad enough, is challenging enough. So what opportunities are there to get feedback directly from the faculty?
There's a great question, and truth in all honesty, everybody's busy. You guys are running top tier organizations within the nation, the globe. Faculty are managing 2 or 3 cohorts at any given time. We take our share of the blame in terms of the faculty really needs to be reaching out more to the preceptors and more responsive to their needs. The other thing that we have is our quarterly teleconferences that serve as opportunities to tap back in and touch bases with the faculty or raise any concerns or questions that you may be having. But yeah, we need to be and get that faculty, going back to that triad. That's one place that we could at least shoot an email. Hey, how are things going? Everything's great. So I don't know if that answered the question, but the other
thing is that we've built in kind of a little bit of a fail-safe, and we require our students to submit a complete project as well as a draft in January. So that's really our opportunity as advisors to take a look at the quality of work that's being done. And you should expect as preceptor formal feedback from the advisor on, listen, this student, this is the right level of work, this is the appropriate scale and scope of the project, and then you can then make your calibrations one way or another. Most times that we find they're on track, move out with two different projects that are along these lines. The other thing that I want to reiterate as well is that we're looking for coverage across the competencies. And so the student might have a strength in finance, and so they can do BCAs all day long. We don't want a student to come back to us with 3 business case analysis projects. If they're struggling in ethics, or have them do an ethical review. So we're looking at the portfolios to provide coverage across the competencies, and then again, we have that built-in mechanism to get some formal feedback from the advisors.
Great point. Okay, so the resident's responsibility, number 1, graduate. They should be out there, pooping and snooping around for opportunities. As I mentioned before, they're proactive. They should be willing to go out there and find work as well. So here's something I want to hit on too. This hasn't happened, but I always brief the students on this before they go out the door. But you just have to keep on harping on this and making sure that it doesn't happen. But if a student is at your facility and is like, hey, I already got my 3, projects. I don't need to do anything else. I got my 3 projects. That's the wrong answer. That student is there to work under your tutelage and to receive their direction and guidance on how they should move throughout the hospital. So we haven't had that problem, but I just we've been moving and sharpening the pencil in terms of our projects. It used to be you could submit how many projects that you want. We've gotten 7, 8 projects from some students. We've whittled it down to 4 projects in the best practice, and then this year it's 3 projects in the best practice. So we want to make sure that doesn't mean that the student's just like, hey, I can't do anything else. That's not the answer. Okay. So, and I'd like to reiterate that just because over the last couple of years we've been kind of tightening the shot group in terms of the expectations as it pertains to portfolios.
So, question.
Yes.
Haven't had a resident before. When you say a BCA as a project, to me that's not a project. That's a step 1 of a much larger process that's involved. So are you looking at a BCA as that would be teed up as a project and get credit for somebody?
Absolutely. At the end of the day with the business case analysis, the students just, evaluating multiple courses of action in order to provide a recommendation to a decision maker. So we think that would be actually it's a great project. Actually, it's a very tough project if it's done correctly to do, from your computing your MPVs, and this is what I expect. I teach the Finance 3 class, business case analysis. So anytime someone submits a BCA on business case, my question is, where's your sensitivity analysis? What are your non-financial implications and things of that nature? I need to see your MPV, your discount rate, and all that other good stuff. So if done right, that is a very extremely robust project. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully it did.
I would also add that the process of gathering data, working with your analysts, the process of actually communicating the BCA in front of a senior executive, all those things. And so I wouldn't just look at the BCA in isolation.
Absolutely.
I would look at the process leading into it, the inputs as well as the outputs coming out of it, as a part of the kind of the overall project to develop that student. Yeah. So I think if you can wicker those aspects in, you'll cover more competencies.
That's a great point, because at the end of the day, you're doing soup to nuts in terms of competencies, really, when you're looking at a business case analysis.
For me, I guess it's just expectation management, because I got folks in the organization that can do that in about 2 weeks. And so if we're doing 3 of these, or one of those, I mean, it goes down to the time question. Say, hey, I got my stuff done. What do I do now? So I'll talk to you offline.
Okay. Sir.
I could comment on that. You got to remember, if they're not in your hospital and they're in my organization and they're not familiar with any of the infrastructure of the politics and the group dynamics and everything else that's going on for the political environment here, it's a lot more work than knowing military terminology, who exactly to go to get the information. So it's a very in-depth thing. But after, what is our mission? Why are we doing this? It's real world dollars. It's going to have a thank you for doing it next, because it's not going to pay off for it.
Yeah. And another point of that is, it's not just about the portfolio projects, it's about that residency plan. And I kind of glossed over it. I'll touch on it later. They should be rotating through emergency department, finance, spending 2 or 3 days here, going throughout the whole facility, and they're required to kind of write up, what was going on in their quarterly report. I went to the, finance department, I learned this, that, previously, during a didactic year, I had challenges understanding, the step-down method. I spoke to their CFO, and she gave me some more clarity, so I actually increased my competency in that particular way. So, so they should, it's just not just projects, it's going throughout the hospital and figuring out how the sausage is made. All right, I got to move on here because we got a lot of content here. But so faculty advisors, again, are serving as the custodian, the ultimate reviewer of these projects to make sure throughout the year that the student is doing what they need to do in terms of projects. At the beginning of the year, students are going to submit their residency plan on how they're going to move throughout the hospital, and I'll actually touch on that here in a second. So here it is, facilitate quarterly meetings with the resident and the preceptor. So, we should be reaching out and actually engaging, whether that's an email, teleconference, whatever, just to make sure that everything is on tap with that student. Okay? Assist residency with preceptors, resident and preceptor on methodology, theoretical applications, research design, things of that nature, reviewing the BEAR. Okay? And the BEAR and the quarterly report, that's pretty much the same, that is the same thing, so I don't want anybody to be confused. That the BEAR is where you actually do your quarterly reports. Okay? And yes, the Miss Lorena Bailey, who is the residency director, charged with, aligning students with the residencies, evaluating the students' competencies, and trying to identify the best fit for those particular students. Okay? And kind of facilitates all the deliverables and making sure that, everybody, the faculty is, you're nudging the faculty, making sure that they're doing what they need to be doing in order to make sure that the students are meeting their marks. Okay? Coordinate site visits, that's another one. Again, we're aggressively moving out to get someone at all of our different locations. Sometimes students, and I'm sure preceptors, feel like they're on an island by themselves. But what we're trying to do is get someone out at all of our sites, at least once every 2 or 3 years, I believe is Colonel Kim's guidance. But it may not necessarily be Lorena that's going out. You may find myself or Colonel Kim or Dr. Richter or any of the faculty going out just to make sure that they're assessing and making sure that your needs are being met and get your feedback. All right. So I mentioned this. We're always trying to strengthen the residency. There are actually at the end of the year there is an actual survey that's sent out to all the preceptors, so we can receive input on how the students are doing or better ways to develop the residency program. One initiative that we also do in order to maximize the fit between our student and our residency location is that, and we started this last year, where we'll send out a sheet to our residents, and what we like the residents to do is give an overview of the location, the residency site, unique residency characteristics and opportunities, potential project opportunities that are out there, and a brief description of who the preceptor is. And our plan, and this is the first iteration where we're actually going out to have these documents updated. But the intent on this is to have these documents available so when the students arrive, we can put them in a centrally located location. If a student has a particular interest in a particular site, they can have some insight as to what they might be able to expect at that residency site. Additionally, it gives Lorena and the faculty data in evaluating those students to see, hey, this person, is a nurse and has been developed in these particular domains and competencies. This is what's going on at UCLA. That may be a good fit. So it just kind of helps to close the the fit gap between student and the location. Okay? All right. So let's move on. Renee Pryor, you as preceptors may not be familiar with her, but at the end of the day, she is the puppet master that holds all the cards and pulling all the strings in the back of the residency, of not only the residency program, but the academic year. So Renee is our education technician. So when the students are coming into the program, she's processing all their information, making sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed in terms of getting the student into the program. In terms of residency, at the end of the day, once all the deliverables are submitted, Renee makes sure that all those are done in order to communicate to Baylor, Maine, that these students are ready to graduate. Another thing that Renee does is she's going to send out a message in terms of residency for those students that are interested in going to Baylor, Maine in order to participate in the actual graduation. And she gives all the timelines, the deadlines in order to make that happen. So that will come out via email to the students in Canvas, the website that I alluded to that all the documents are uploaded to. There's a capacity for us to send out messages and emails through Canvas. And that's really the tool, the central tool that we use to communicate with the students as a whole. Email announcements, things of that nature will all come through Canvas. So, Renee, all roads lead to Ms. Pryor. All right. Everybody's met our illustrious program director. His leadership in the program has been tremendous over the last 2 years and moving us forward. At the end of the day, Colonel Kim is given the blessings on if all the students are going to graduate, approves their awards, things of that nature, serves as an appeal authority for all the disputes in terms of whether a student has submitted a completed portfolio or not. So at the end of the day, really all the roads stop with Colonel Kim. Renee first, then Colonel Kim. Buck stops there. The book stops there. All right, so residency plan. I kind of mentioned that, so we'll go a little bit into detail with that. Okay, it's in page 22 of the residency manual. At the end of the day, this is a contract. Wrong word. This is a document that shows the faculty advisor what the student will be doing at their location. It is a flexible document. It's just a way ahead for how the student anticipates on moving throughout the program. It's great. We like the students to incorporate, if they're going to Aunt Jean's wedding, in Spokane, the third week of February, put that in there. If you're going to take any leaves, trips to other locations, get all that programmed so we have kind of a roadmap of how the student is going to be moving forward. Now, once the student sits down with the preceptor and they kind of decide on what's going to be done and how the student's going to move through the organization, that document is uploaded to Canvas. Faculty advisor kind of looks it over, make sure everything is good, make sure that we are, again, and this is a Brad Beauvais term, spreading the peanut butter as far across the bread as we can, getting that student maximum exposure to the different departments and areas of your facility. Okay? Another thing, we really like our students to get exposed to executive level leadership decision making. So making sure that those students are sitting in there, being exposed to executive level decision making is one of the critical components, in addition to the portfolio development, in addition to the rotations throughout the hospital. Okay. Curtailments, I'll quickly touch on curtailments. As I mentioned, it's a 52-week process. However, students can receive a curtailment. Curtailments are ultimately approved by the program director. Curtailments are usually they're few and far between. If a student gets selected for some type of opportunity, for some type of schooling, or other like, we tend to approve those for specific instances. I just want to start my trip to Spain early with my family is probably not going to be approved because we really want the student to be exposed in that facility as long as they can. But it can be done, and if a student has a situation, for example, Anna Lee is at Scripps Health in San Diego, and her branch manager had informed us that the slot that she's going to, the actual dentist has to leave early for, I'm not going to go into all the details. Would it be okay if Anna reported 3 weeks early in order to kind of close the gap? She wrote up the memo, sent it to her academic advisor, ultimately through the program director. Colonel Kim got wind of it and blessed it, and it was no problem at all. So just keep that in mind if something happens where a student has a unique circumstance and they can't make it all the way through. Okay, evaluations. This is wrong. I meant to update this, but we just recently changed this from last year. And this is particularly to Army students. If you have an Army student that is at a civilian residency site, their evaluation, they won't be evaluated by the program director. This is the old model. They'll be evaluated by the faculty advisor and ultimately senior rated by Colonel Kim as the program director. Okay. Navy will receive NOBs. What's that again, ma'am? Non-observed reports, and the Air Force get training reports. Okay. And we don't have any civilians in for this time. Actually, we don't send civilians to. We haven't sent any. Have we sent civilians to a civilian site? I don't think so. One time. Yeah, but yeah, we did half and half. But okay. So we'll cross that bridge if it happens again. So let's talk a little bit about, in my 15 minutes, the graduate management portfolio. This is really where I want to get a little bit into the detail onto some of the expectations of the graduate management portfolio. We've, as I've mentioned, and you know, one of the themes that has kind of permeated throughout this whole conference is that we're always trying to get feedback and better develop our students, better develop our products, better develop the process. So 2 years ago, we really started looking at, you know, the portfolio. How can we make it better? How can we be more direct in letting the students know what the expectations are? So we've recently gone through a redevelopment of the portfolio, and I think it's working pretty well. I think we only had 4 rewrites from this year, and 2 years ago, I think we had as much as 20% rewrite. So a lot of that, you know, some of that is on the faculty for not being expressly clear, and we acknowledge that and kind of move forward. Okay, so capstone, required to graduate. You're going to do an analysis. You know, we want to make sure we're focused on competencies. We wanted the student to demonstrate tools, models, or methods that they use during the academic year. You know, they go through a bunch of credit hours, so it shouldn't be too difficult finding some type of framework or, you know, structure, process, outcome, business case analysis, Porters. There should be something that the student should be kind of underpinning their analysis. Okay, graduate level rigor. The faculty advisor kind of help out with that. But again, you know, the student needs to be able to differentiate, you know, a product that is a Baylor trained student is producing as to someone that hasn't gone through a program. And again, 4 projects this year, 3 portfolio projects. 3 portfolio projects and 1 best practice, okay, for a total of 4. Okay. Now, this is something that I want to make sure that I'm clear on. The portfolio project is really a summary, and it's 3 pages because, you know, if you do a business case, it's not going to be a 3-page business case, you know, really at the end of the day. What these students are doing is taking these bigger projects and condensing them into something that can be consumed in 3 pages. You know, why is that? Well, one of the tools and skill set that these students need to learn is how to take a whole bunch of information, consolidate it, and get your point across. And that's one of the things that we're testing on there. Okay, 4 pages of appendices. That before we extended that, I think we had 2 in previous years. But we want to give the students the opportunity to, you know, we've had various conversations about this as faculty, to demonstrate their work. Whether, you know, and to be honest, if you're doing a business case and you want to kind of show your evidence, you're probably going to need more than 2 pages. Okay. All right.
Is that required or not to exceed?
Not to exceed. Great question, Sarika. Not to exceed 4 pages, okay, of appendices. So here's the portfolio review process, right? First, the preceptor reviews and endorses. The resident's going to post it to Canvas. There's a team of 3 faculty members that are going to review the portfolio. You got to get at least, and the portfolio is graded in total. It's not individual projects. You know, does this portfolio as a whole meet muster and pass? So you need to have at least 2 passes in order for it to meet muster for the program for the student to actually get a pass on their portfolio. Okay, and the program director is the final approval authority. If we generally say it's a pass, he generally says okay. Where we have to kind of involve the program directors when we have rewrites. So if a student receives a rewrite, They have, it's about 2 weeks. I have 2 or 3 weeks here. They have about 2 weeks, 10 to 12 days, depending on how it falls on the calendar, in order to do the rewrite. And us as faculty, what we're charged to do is giving the student explicit guidance on how to strengthen their portfolio so that they can be teed up to be successful. Okay, so if after the faculty gives that additional guidance and marks to meet, and the student submits the portfolio, and they still haven't met muster after receiving that guidance from the faculty member, well, it's referred to Colonel Kim at that time, the program director. And Colonel Kim has the ability to say, okay, give that student some more time, after he looks at all the evidence and everything that's going on, or he has the opportunity to give them the opportunity to do a legacy thesis. And I like to call this the death penalty, all right? Because if you couldn't rewrite your portfolio of summary of projects after receiving additional guidance and the guidance in the manual, the legacy thesis is essentially, Colonel Craig, doing what we did, Sarika, when we were here. A mile deep, this wide, literature review, 30 pages, whatever, So I would surmise if you can't get this right, it's going to be tough to get that right. So we really don't want Colonel Kim, pulling the handle on a student. But has it happened? Yes, twice in the previous class. But in truth in lending, you can kind of see which students are going to have those problems as they make it through the program. But what I also tell you as preceptors, one of the students, a contributing factor was some of the things that the preceptor was doing. And I want to bring this to light because I think it's critical. When we have our students out at our residency locations, their job is to be a resident. Sometimes the students will go to an MTF and there's some DCA or hard charge. Hey, you can do some of your duties as chief of managed care, or those type of things. And sometimes the student will have one foot in one boat and one foot in the other. That student is there for the second year to be a student. And in one of those particular cases, a student, and I think some of it was his doing too, because whatever. Needless to say, when you have a resident, let that resident be a resident. Don't have him or her, doing chief of program, PA&E, whatever the case may be. They need to be focusing on completing the residency and getting everything give them that opportunity to learn. Give that officer an opportunity to develop. Okay, we'll have plenty of time to harvest once they move on into their job. Is that okay, sir? Would you like to add anything? That's okay. All right. Super duper. Yes, sir.
Is there feedback to move back to the preceptor on how the student did and what was strong, what we could do better as preceptors potentially to maximize future residents as they come through?
That's a great question. One of the main mechanisms that we rely upon now is the end-of-year critique, or the survey in which we send out the preceptors saying, hey, what went good, what went well, how can we improve? It's not necessarily tailored on an individual student, and I think that's the question that you're asking, how to give individual feedback to students. Is that what your question is?
Well, if the portfolio is the seminal project that they're being graded on,
yep.
Then if it's not passing muster when it comes through, I would take that as a hit on me as a preceptor that I haven't done something appropriately.
Well,
so how is that feedback getting back that, hey, this was great, keep driving on or not?
That's a great point. Now, again, the triad is what's responsible for ensuring that student gets through. So there's just as much blame on the faculty as the student, and there's a blame machine gun that can go around if we have a student that's not successful. The student as well takes on some blame. But that's something that we need to consider right now, and Colonel Clem mentioned this. One of the first stopgaps that we put in place was that mid-year review for the student. And prior to us putting that kind of that point in the residency year, we just took the students' portfolios in May, and sometimes we don't know what we're going to see. So we put that in place in order, and I'm getting to your question. We put that place in order to ensure, one, that we're evaluating the student in terms of, are they making progress? They submit one full project and a draft of a project. Okay, so if they're even now it's down to 3 projects, so that they're really getting there. Before it was 4. So making sure that they're doing projects, not waiting till the 11th hour to do the projects. The second is that that is the time for that academic advisor to evaluate using this rubric. And you guys can actually, because this is the first time we put it in the residency manual this year, but the faculty advisor, and this is if you want, it's on page 48. Here's a general rubric, kind of an overarching rubric for how we look, some questions that you can ask that student when you're evaluating their project. Now, right now, as it stands, the faculty advisor gives that student direct feedback through Canvas. What we may need to do, and I'm sure it's not consistent across the board. I'm sure it's happening in some environments, but maybe we need to do a better job of wrapping in the faculty advisor to receiving that input. I'm sure it's going, it's not standardized. We don't have it in the manual, but maybe some way we need to make sure that we're touching bases with that faculty advisor to say, hey, this is, the student's doing great. Here are some of the things we need to prove, or, so that they can kind of have a place to touch and see how their student is developing. I'm not sure if that's standardized or institutionalized in how we do our business right now.
I think what he's asking is feedback to the preceptor. So if you're giving feedback to the student saying, hey, you missed the mark,
Yep.
The preceptor should be CC'd.
Yeah.
They're on the ground and they can pull
Yeah.
the student
Yeah.
aside.
There's two opportunities that I'm going to speak to for that. The mid-year review, and like I said, what we're doing now is we are giving that student feedback via Canvas. That's probably an opportunity where, and this is the mid-year review in January, we need to be touching bases with the preceptor there, because the guidance is being provided and the feedback is being provided to the student. Right now, I think it's fair to say that we are assuming that the student is touching bases, but we may need to look at a way to standardize that so that we're ensuring that the preceptor is receiving that feedback. The second point is in May, when we actually review their portfolios. And I know Colonel Kim sends a detailed email to the preceptors saying, hey, this person didn't make it, or it's to the preceptor and the student? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple points on that. I think this is an area that we can tighten up a bit for sure. So, so I'm looking at Lorena. So this is an area really where I think having someone full-time will be helpful. I think we could look at, and maybe part of the preceptor, we can have a dialogue on whether allowing preceptors access into Canvas is the right approach, or would that be too cumbersome? And maybe we can have some dialogue about that. I think that would be some healthy discussion that we can have, or whether it's through email. But we could certainly tie up or a phone call. I mean, and just to let you know, for the failures that we had last year, I reached out personally and I had phone conversations with those preceptors, and I said, this is what we found from our perspective. What do you see from your perspective on why the student didn't make it? And that's where really I got the information that preceptor was really calibrating the projects to students that he had worked with in the past, and it was the inappropriate calibration for our students, and that's why they didn't make it. So that was a phone call back to it. Thankfully, we don't have a lot that fall into that category of failing the second time, but we can certainly improve our processes communicating with the preceptor and the student back to the advisor. There are some comments. Fred, you had.
Just the limiting factor for the preceptors on Canvas is that it's Baylor owned. So if you don't have a Baylor email address, we can't add you to it. So that's the major challenge lies in adding you to Canvas. It's not so much that we're trying to be secretive or anything like that, but it is a factor that Baylor controls.
But I think it's a hurdle that we can overcome. We're trying to move towards that by including, the rubric that we use to evaluate individual projects. There's a separate rubric for overall, but this kind of gives you a step-by-step on what we're expecting from each of the sections.
I just want to also add on Canvas, the nice thing about that is if we can get you access through Baylor, Lynn, you don't think that's possible?
Noise for the preceptors. They don't need all that.
Okay.
They need communication between us, the faculty member, and that preceptor.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll take the blame on mine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's. So it sounds like there's a lot of interest in maybe coming up with creative ways of addressing this. Well, why don't we'll put that in the parking lot, and we'll discuss that during the preceptor panel.
Okay, excellent.
Is it possible to, since all the preceptors are awesome people anyway, but we get some type of either directory of the other preceptors that we could reach out to and talk to? Because I think that if you've done it 6 times, sir, I might want to call you up and go, hey, what'd you do here? So I think it's another avenue for us to do. Is that possible?
I think it's absolutely possible. So again, I'm adding to Lorena's list. So she's writing her list again.
Absolutely.
There's a need. There's certainly been a need for full time. So those handouts that we're collecting, those information sheets, I think that would be great if we could just create that and publish that. So make that electronically available to all our preceptors. We want to add additional value other than the student to you all as being a part of our residency, as a residency host site. So again.
All right, well, I'm going to kind of move through these next slides. So basically the project types could, there are a variety of projects that the students could do. That's in there for you. So let's talk a little bit about the introduction and background, and I'm going to give you some points of what we're expecting to see, and then speak to what we've been seeing under the new system that I may want you all to harp on. So essentially with the introduction and background, you just want to essentially give this overview of whether the project is. I like to describe it as an upside-down triangle where you want to go from kind of general to specific, which ultimately is going to lead to your problem statement, okay? And one thing that we like to see with the problem statement is, try to give some type of, it doesn't have to be quantified, it could be qualitative, but kind in this problem statement, dollars is always a good way, but at the end of the day, I tell my students, when you write your problem statement, whoever you're presenting to, their ears should perk up when you give that problem statement. We're leaking $5 million out to the network, or we're losing this amount in an opportunity. So try to have the student try to give some type of magnitude of the problem there. And purpose statement, I'll let you read that, and there's an example in the residency manual. Of course, we expect the student to do a literature review, which kind of drives their research or trying to understand what's going on and what has been previously done. They may be able to harvest some of those things in order to inform their particular project. Clearly, methods and tools, let the student make sure that they're explaining, this is one thing that all the students didn't do a good job of, but briefly explaining what tool you're using or method, and we keep on harping back to these tools and methods because all that goes back to how we demonstrating that we're using something that we learned during the didactic year. So, briefly in a sentence or two, what tool we're using, why it's justified, okay? So, and also in the methods section, we ask the students to use I did this, I did that. We want to know what the student expressly did inside their portfolio project. So we ask them to use I pulled the data from this place, I did this, I did that. This is really where the student has the opportunity to shine. Explain to me what you did, show me how you demonstrated those tools that you learned during the didactic year, okay? There it is, states individual contributions with the pronoun I, okay? Okay, results and discussion, make sure that you're discussing the findings of your research. All right. One thing that I like the students to make sure that I highlight here is when you have tables and figures in the back, in your results section, don't just say, see table 6. You should be saying on table 6, you see that income is this, that, the other, expressly pointing to where, what specific you want the faculty to take note of in terms of the results of discussion. Okay. Okay. Here, at least in the projects that I looked at, students, I think they're just using their sixth sense in terms of conclusion and recommendations. Briefly summarize the problem, purpose, and methodology that you used. Then you can go into your things about recommendations and implications, okay? Figures and tables, again, 4-page limit, okay? We talked a little bit about the best practice, and I'll cover it very briefly. But at the end of the day, the purpose of the best practice is to kind of find out what all the facilities within that are stakeholders and are invested in our program are doing, because what we're trying to do is share these best practices, give something out to the field to kind of look at what are they doing at Mayo, or what are they doing at Walter Reed, or what are they doing at Cleveland. We post all of our best practices on the MHA website. So you can click on the Army-Baylor MHA website, go to best practices, and we'll have the best practices there. And you can click on there and say, oh, this is what's going on here or there. That's interesting. I never looked at it from that perspective. So I throw that out there real quickly on the best practice, okay? I'm going to kind of go over that, pass over that because we're kind of over on time. Here are the two things that I want to touch to on the Bayer, okay? As Colonel Peacock alluded to, there are 2 tabs for the residency assessment, okay? During the residency year, there's the residency assessment, and she showed you that picture where you are aligning whether a project or rotation that student is doing, and you're quantitatively identifying what competency it's touching on. Then there's the portfolio comments. That's the second tab, and that's where the kind of qualitative piece is going to be. I rotated through the Department of Pharmacy. I learned this. I learned that. I learned the other. So we have two mechanisms of doing an assessment of what the student is learning and the tie-in to the competencies. Okay. There are key dates in here. The one thing that I want to highlight, 13 January, is the mid-year review for the students. And here where all the progress reports are due. That's in your slide presentation as well as the residency manual. And an example of the Preceptor certification memo is on the Canvas site. So if you haven't done it before, it's nothing hard. You know, I think Misha did what he needed to do. Please give him 9 credits. Well, don't use that, but you know what I mean. It doesn't have to be that difficult is what I'm getting at. All right. There's a number of awards that the students and the faculty, the Preceptor can earn. Boom Powell Award is the excellence in student research. So the student that is determined by the faculty to have submitted the overall best portfolio. The Dean Tolan Award, this is for the Preceptor year. So we like to identify our preceptors that are doing outstanding jobs in the field. And we ask the students to submit a write-up for the Preceptor if they're going to put them in for the Dean Tolan Award. And the Colonel Richard Harder Award, which is the outstanding best practice. Okay? Here are some key pages inside your residency manual that you can kind of quickly go to, because I don't need you thumbing through the whole thing. You all are executives and you don't have that much time, but if you just want to kind of identify some key locations, your responsibilities, one, documentation, those are probably 2 places. And here are a list of all the enclosures, the blank bare template, a sample of the residency plan, different tools for success. We try to make sure that our students understand etiquette and are doing the right things while they're out there. And the rubric is that enclosure I. So if you could look at that rubric and kind of answer those questions, that'll give you some guiding principles to kind of, and a lens to look through as you evaluate the portfolios for the students. Okay? Here's my contact information. Feel free to call me. Don't call me on this number because we're all over the place at the Baylor program. We're in the classroom teaching. We're in the office. We're doing other duties as assigned in interacting with the graduate school. You can call it, but I am always answering this number right here. At least I will see your call there, okay? So this is probably the best way to get me. Email is always a good way to get me as well. So with that, what are your questions? Yes, sir.
On that, the mid-year.
Yes, sir.
They're required to submit all 3 projects and the best practice draft?
No. For the mid-year, the only thing they're responsible, and that's a wonderful question, what is required at the mid-year review? 1 completed project and a half or a draft of a second project. That's the guidance that we're using right now. Okay. So 1 full project and a draft of a project. Actually, they're both really drafts. Because the other question that comes about, well, can we grade that project since it's already there? That's not, we're trying to do all the grading at one period. That just add another layer of kind of assessment.
When they're coming into the residency, they understand that in January they need to have a solid project done
Yes.
by January.
Yes.
A draft of the second.
Yes.
That may be a good opportunity to say you might need to submit at least the ideas for all 3 and an idea for your best practice to make sure at least they're tracking their understanding of these are the level of work or the kind of the scope and depth.
Absolutely. And hopefully the academic advisor is having those discussions with the student in terms of where they stand on other projects as well. I'm sure that the preceptors have ideas of where they want to possibly have that student working. Sometimes I've had one of my advisees submit 2 projects, 2.5 projects during that period, and I'll take a look at them. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Just on when they're doing all this analysis, I can just, the emphasis I give to them is, for me, this data is used and it's used long term. Like 2 years ago, I had 2 different projects for Justin, the dietitian that came through. I'm still getting today, this is real world, going to be impacted. In the military, you get assignments. I don't know how the Army did it, but it was every year and a half you changed positions. Every 3 years you PCS to a location. I have to live with the analysis now that these people are making. And so, today for my analysis 2 years ago on an MRI, I get a question on where are you at, what are you doing? If you're not meeting your targets, what are you doing to make up the revenue? And the same thing, I decreased a physician's salary by $30,000 a year based on one of the analysis projects. So it impacts people's lives. So I emphasize that a lot, that this is going to be used, so it's got to be accurate. You got to think it all through.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful point to add. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question about finance. So as far as availability of funds, we could send them folks, and I saw some of the stuff in the manual, but is there still availability of like one TDY, one PCF, something where it comes from the military they can get some alternative funding to if we wanted to send them like ACHE or something like that?
That's a great point, and a point that I want to speak to. Once upon a time, we used to require that the site receiving a resident would send the student to a conference, ACHE, MGMA. Are they still around? Okay. Yeah, okay. One of them's not here anymore. I believe the primary reason for that is because a lot of military people aren't going to the conferences anymore because TDY funds are shrinking. I make that point because we don't ask them that to be a requirement anymore. And I think to your point, are there any funds available? I think Colonel Kim has some funds, but I'm not sure if he's going to want to give those. So the answer to that, our program will not. We're not going to fund that. Now, the point that I want to make specific to the civilian locations, we cannot ask you to send a student to a location. Our student can, specifically and explicitly say, "Hey, send me here," and it's Now, you can send them, but it has to be an offer from your organization. And once that happens, there's a legal document, which is fairly straightforward, that a student has to say, hey, these are the funds. They've agreed to send me to X, Y, or Z place. We have to run it up the legal channels and kick it back and say, hey, the student's good to go. It's administrative and just make sure that all our bases are covered, but it's really straightforward. So if you desire to send somebody, we can make that happen. But we can't ask you to send anybody. I'm already over by about 10 minutes. I know Lorena's going to kill me. Yep. Yeah. No. Go ahead. She's driving the train, so if one more question.
So we sent one of the students.
We sent two.
Her department paid them to go to our
Ooh.
quality improvement training. Does that need to be going to some sort of disclosure thing?
It's here local.
It's here local, but it was cost. It was a gift to them.
Yeah.
I gifted you 4K.
The answer is yes, especially because you told me not that you should. No, I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek, but yeah, it's the right thing to do. It's not like they're going to say no. They're just going to look at it and just make sure that there's nothing that you're expecting from the government to give you in return for something like that. So the right answer is yeah, you should probably have your student submit that letter and let us run it up the legal channels. Hopefully, I don't whatever. Yeah.
Are the students getting told that membership in a professional organization is not required? Because there's a lot of confusion out there in the field that there's this tacit, you must be a member of ACHE, you must,
etc. We do not mandate that any student is a member of any organization. We expose the students to opportunities to take advantage of being a member of an organization. Truth in lending, I'm not an ACHE. I shouldn't tell you guys that. Who knows? But no, we don't require the students to be a part of it. Yeah, historically back in our day, we're go to ACHE and join, and oh, by the way, here's the exam and study for it. But we're not required to have the students join. Yes. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you, Misha, very much.
Thank you.